Hi, good evening. So tonight we come together to talk about menopause. So in the beginning, I just want to talk a little bit about what is menopause? How do you know when you're going through it? So menopause is a natural change from the fertile to the unfertile part of a woman's life, and basically happens when the ovaries start to not work as well, and eventually they stop producing the hormones as much as they did in the past. Now, menopause usually happens between ages 45 to 55, and the average age at which a woman goes through menopause is 51, but again, there is a range of normal in there. So, how does someone know that they're going through the change? If you're not having your period for 12 months, that's the formal definition. No testing is needed. Really, the testing doesn't do anything other than tell us that somewhere in that time frame your hormones are going up and down, and can kind of be all over the place to a degree. And so, generally speaking, especially if someone's getting the symptoms of menopause, which are classically hot flashes, night sweats. Sometimes women get a little bit moody during that as well. Sleeping problems. Women start to have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep sometimes, even if they don't get the night sweats as well. And so that can make women feel a little bit irritable sometimes the next day. Vaginal dryness. So as the level of estrogen drops, the vagina, which is a very hormone responsive tissue, can become a little bit on the drier side. And can cause some discomfort and itching and pain during sex, of course. One of the treatments for that is basically estrogen that can go into the vagina, by the way. Very popular when needed. And also mood swings, troubles concentrating, feeling uninterested in normal activities, kind of depression style of symptoms can also happen as well when the hormones are swinging. And the biggest one that people complain about a lot is the hot flashes. So about 60 to 80% of women complain of hot flashes when they're going through this change. And by the way, the change usually takes about 4 years to kind of go through entirely. And the hot flashes, basically the top part of the body starts to feel warm, kind of spreading out from the face and the upper chest. Lasts for about 2 minutes, 4 minutes, something like that, and then it kind of resolves on its own. And sometimes when the hot flash happens, women sometimes feel anxiety or heart palpitations, the heart beats funny or fast, and can happen a couple of times a day. It can happen a couple of times per hour, all through the day, all through the night. Not exactly something that women have much conscious control of at all, but it is a very common symptom that women seek treatments for. So what is it that we do for treatments for menopause? Well, one of the popular ones is various styles of hormone therapies, and of course the details highly recommend you talk about with your personal physician. I tend to go a little bit more with some of the non-hormonal, just because if there's different parts of the body that are hormone responsive that we might not want to stimulate too much with extra estrogen, like, for example, the breasts. A lot of times women have other estrogen sources flowing around and don't want to hyper-stimulate some of those receptors. Anyway, the tricks with hormone replacement therapy, the gestalt of it usually is give women enough hormone to control the symptoms for the shortest amount of time and then get them off of the hormones. It tends to be the main thing that people usually focus on to help with the symptoms but reduce the risk for side effects from the hormones and such. So the main thing is that for non-hormonal treatments, for example, when a woman is going through those hot flashes, some deep diaphragmatic breathing can be very helpful in the moment to help settle that down and to have less symptoms. Wearing light clothing, for example, that can breathe very easily when the heat comes. And other things such as scheduling adequate sleep times, such as having a cool fan in the evening to help keep things cool as well. And then some other food stuff, which of course, I was going to talk about food along the way. I'll get over now. So basically, one of the main things as far as foods goes that's very helpful during the menopausal time is soy. You gotta love soy. But all forms of soy, women that have a few servings of soy a day tend to have lower rates of breast cancers and such as well. And there's a lot of neat research that goes on about that. I'll share with you the links on Dr. Greger's website. But soy comes in many forms. This is edamame, for example. This is the whole soy bean, which can just be defrosted and eaten directly. Also, tofu is a ever popular, very, very versatile form of soy. And the ever popular soy milk of some sort, which I just have an example of here, and you can make soy yogurt out of it as well. So soy is a popular one because basically it's got something called phytoestrogens, and as mentioned in other video presentations, the estrogen receptor, if you have animal estrogens, it binds and then it can trigger changes down the line on those receptors. But when you have a soy phytonutrient, it's estrogen-like. It binds a little bit and it blocks it from being overstimulated by the animal estrogen receptor on there. And so it can help reduce the risk for the breast cancers on there. Lignans also are very helpful as well during the menopausal time, mostly because it also is very helpful for reducing breast cancer during that time. So one of the summaries here from Dr. Greger's Nutrition Facts. In a recent study, postmenopausal breast cancer survivors on tamoxifen, so this is ladies that have gone through menopause and have survived breast cancer and are on a medication to help prevent that cancer from coming back. In that study, the ones who ate the most soy of what they were normally eating anyway had the lowest rates of that breast cancer coming back. And at the same time, it also helps with things like hot flashes and such. And also the same thing with lignan intake. So flax seeds are very, very good sources of lignans, Lignan. Sorry, tough to spell there. And the best part of flax seeds is if you can get them fresh and put them in a little coffee grinder or something, $5 coffee grinder from the grocery store. Basically, that freshly ground flaxseed is going to have the highest concentration of those lignans, which are a little bit on the delicate side. So, highly recommend you get your flax in the whole seed form, and then just as needed, you can grind them up, add it to something like oatmeal or something, for example. Add it to your soy yogurt, why not? But anyway, the women that had the higher lignan intake also had lower breast cancer incidence on there. And also, the postmenopause women with the breast cancer tended to have higher estrogen levels in general than the women that did not have the breast cancer. And so they were talking about how basically the women that were on a whole food plant-based diet had the lowest levels of that extra estrogen floating around in the system. And again, many reasons for that. A lot of the stuff that's in our food supply tends to mess with our hormones to a fair degree. More on that on the upcoming lectures. Anyway, as it says, this might explain why the the breast cancer risk is reduced by a plant-based diet, because essentially the extra estrogen is flushed out of the body with the extra fibers and such. And then basically if your tumors are not getting access to that extra estrogen, they're less likely to flourish, and so forth. Another food that was found to help disrupt the process of the tumors creating their own estrogen to feed themselves, there was a study that found that mushrooms, which are very healthy for you anyway, can help disrupt that process and basically keep the breast cancer tumors a little bit more at bay. So mind you, I am saying that having these as a part of a healthy whole food plant-based diet can be a very, very useful in addition to everything else that you're doing to take care of yourself, kind of thing, not as a replacement for your physician. Very, very important. Keep that in mind. What I'm saying is possible and what is not so much. So anyway, so the soy foods helps with the hot flashes and other symptoms, and there was another study that showed that dried apple consumption was good for the heart health in women that have gone through the menopausal time frame. Switching over to Dr. Barnard's Nutrition MD. So he's got a small review here, basically talking about the soy products and using them for helping with hot flashes and such. The phytoestrogens is what they think is the helpful part of it, but there's a very big difference between eating it in the form of, say, your edamame or your soybeans or something that's kind of similar to a actual plant food, as opposed to trying to get it in a little tiny pill form. Because again, many times when we try to isolate the good stuff out of here, well, what chemicals are using to get the thing out of there, and then what guarantee do you have that your capsule actually contains anything related to soy, or that the active ingredient hasn't been completely squished or killed by the heating process or the drying process or any of the other many things that it takes to get, try to distill the actual food into a pill. Why not actually eat the real food? It's really tasty, and it's also very, very healthy for you. Lots of good fiber as well. He does mention something on there about a low-fat diet. A low-fat diet with about 20% of the calories from fat, significantly fewer hot flashes and night sweats compared to a diet that is closer to about 30% of calories from fat. The typical Western diet is anywhere between 30 to 40% calories from fat. And so you got to keep an eye on the studies, because sometimes if they're saying low fat and they're going from like 30% to 25%, that's usually not enough change to actually make any difference with pretty much anything. But if you're going from like a 40% fat diet to something closer to a 20%, because when you eat a whole food, these things have a little bit of fat in them. In fact, this one has 3.5 grams of fat just naturally in the bean itself, and there's literally nothing in there besides soybeans, So sometimes people worry that if they're going to go whole food, plant-based, no added oils, they say, oh my gosh, where are we going to get our fat source? You have to have fat. Well, it's actually in the foods already. It's things that are alive need to have a little bit of fat in them. And if you're eating those cells, you're going to be getting the benefits of what's naturally present in there. So basically, the lower fat diet, the women had reductions in cholesterol and lower estrogen levels and better mammogram findings, and also, generally speaking, it's good for the heart health as well. That's one of the things that when women are going through menopause, their risk for heart disease kind of goes up in a similar way that men's heart disease goes up around that same age frame. He does mention a little bit about black cohosh. I've seen a little bit of an update, mixed studies on that. I don't usually recommend the black cohosh. I've seen people have it over the time, but I think there was some other side effect, like with the liver or something. I'll put a link on there below if you want to read up on it later. And similarly, there's some other botanicals that have kind of been tried, like clover and such. So I don't necessarily recommend, again, extracts of clover. I mean, we're not exactly out there chomping on clovers, but it's very easy to have a cup of soy milk every day. And the amount of soy in general that's recommended is 3 to 5 servings. Seems to be about the sweet spot for amount of soy that is healthy. Too much, and you start to go into other higher risk of heart disease or something if you're getting too much of it, and too little, you're not getting all the full benefit of the breast cancer blocking effects that it actually has. Actually, really, really fascinating stuff on soy, by the way. It's got its own like defamation league where people are trying to actually actively discredit it, which is a shame because it's actually very, very useful food to have in your toolkit. So a little bit more about assessment and therapy. So other things that women have to look at when they're going through the change of life is bone health. So exercise in general is very, very helpful. Weight-bearing exercise is especially helpful for keeping those bones strong. Avoiding tobacco, that is a key theme amongst everything as well. In addition to the health benefits of having lots of plants in your life, also having a little sunshine, a little exercise is helpful as well. And anything that your body is bearing weight will strengthen those bones. Women that should have a DEXA scan around age 65 to check the risk for osteoporosis or thin bones. So a DEXA, DEXA scan is just a kind of a quick picture to look at the hip, look at the spine, and just see how is it doing on there. Alrighty, so another relaxation, other stress management techniques. So slow, deep breathing was able to decrease the hot flashes by about 30 to 100%, depending on who was doing the relaxation technique. And then other coping skills and other trainings can be helpful as well. So again, just to summarize, very, very natural change of life that all women end up going through at some point or another if they live long enough. By the way, if your uterus has been removed, but you still have the ovaries, even then, women will sometimes feel like they're going through the flashes, the change of life, as it were, as the ovaries themselves. Those are the ones that are secreting that estrogen and changing up as well. So just as in the beginning of having the periods are sometimes heavy, sometimes light, sometimes regular, sometimes irregular, like all over the place. The same kind of thing can happen as a woman starts to go through that perimenopause period, which is meaning to say the few years that are happening right before they go through final menopause, which again is defined as 12 months between one period to the next. So if you're going on 11 months and then all of a sudden you have your period, sorry, the clock starts over again and you gotta count again another 12 months before you consider it fully menopausal. So fibroids and other kinds of fun things that are very common in this age range can make the periods a little bit more unpredictable, a little heavier, a little crazy sometimes. And so again, if you're having any issues with that, please come in to see your physician to talk about it. Anemia can happen during these times as well because if the periods are getting heavier than usual, then it's very easy for women to lose more iron and lose more blood than they're taking in. And I recommend for those women not only having things like the soy and other good healthy foods in general, just as part of a healthy lifestyle, but foods that are rich in iron. Lentils are amazing. They're one of the best foods for iron because for a serving of lentils, you're going to get a lot of good quality iron, and it's not going to cause your stool to be black, and it's not going to cause your stool to go very, very constipated, which is the problem with the iron pills, because again, if you're taking it in a pill form, the iron is going to go in the system and it's going to turn your belly into a rock. Not really, but essentially it can be very, very binding, and very tough on the system overall. Whereas if you get it in the form of like the lentils or black beans, dark green leafy vegetables such as arugula, spinach, and bok choy, or actually probably spinach is a better example, but basically the more you get it in those forms, the easier it is for the body to absorb. Similarly, if you're, sometimes people will use an iron cast cooking pan or something in order to try to get some extra iron during those times. And the downside of that is the type of iron that is absorbed is different. It's the kind that seems to trigger problems with Alzheimer's and other issues later in life. The elemental iron that you find in the cookware, again, the other thing is you can't really control how much is absorbed in a particular meal, and so you kind of get a lot of mishmash as far as what is your body actually taking in from that iron. You really don't have any idea, and you don't have much control over it. So things like the lentils or the black beans or the dark green leafies, those are going to give you a lot of other health benefits like the fiber, the micronutrients, the magnesium, the manganese, all the other good things that go along with it, without any of the liabilities. And that's also the reason why I do not recommend the red meats, because of the liabilities part of it. I mean, I don't want to recommend something that's going to cause like colon cancer or something if I have a much healthier choice that will prevent colon cancer and prevent heart disease and stuff all at the same time. Alrighty, so this is just a quick introduction to the wonderful topic of menopause. So please check out the comment sections. I'm going to have some other links and things down in there that you can read up on if you want to see some additional things you can do. I figure going into a detailed description of all the different kinds of hormone replacement therapies and what's good and bad and stuff is a little bit beyond my scope tonight, so of what I want to put in a video format at this very moment. If a woman is very young and starting to go through menopause, that also definitely recommends talking with a physician, because the testing in that case to try to figure out what's causing those ovaries to shut off too soon can be very useful to check it out. Sorry ladies, if you're between 45 to 55, it's gonna happen. So the more you know, the more you can get ready for it, and the more you can play and hopefully be more comfortable as well. Alrighty, so thank you for watching. Have a good night, and hope I answered your question as well. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.